Why am I the only person wearing a tie? This is Kelly, thank you very much for that kind introduction. Rick, thank you for all you've done to organize this event. Ken, thank you for all the work that you do. Let me begin by saying that Phil, stand up. Phil Vermont, he has worked with me for many years. In Phil's previous life, before I dragged him into the insanity we're undergoing now, Phil was a union organizer with the AFT and organized some of the largest unions in the state of Vermont. Some of you may remember, I think Pat remembers, a couple of months ago, it was a Saturday or Sunday, it was a beautiful day. I came here and we had a meeting, and we really had a wonderful response. It was a beautiful day, we had 50 or 60 people out, and I asked people if they would be prepared to be active in a campaign if I was going to run this. I wasn't sure that I really wanted to do it. And the support that I received that afternoon was one of the factors that made me think that we could put together the kind of grassroots movement that we need to win this thing. So thank you very much for coming out on that day. What I want to do, politics is not as complicated, I think, as the media makes it out. A lot of what media talks about is politics as a baseball game, who's raising money, whose campaign manager is doing this, what person said what dumb thing, or whatever it may be. Or else it's a soap opera, and we go back and look at everybody's lives and all that stuff. But the truth of the matter is, politics is not any different than when you're not feeling well and you walk into a doctor's office. If you walk into a doctor's office, if you're not feeling well, you want a diagnosis and you want a treatment. Essentially, that's what we should be doing as a democratic society. We should be having a serious discussion about the serious problems facing our country. People will disagree, that's called democracy. And then we've got to figure out how do we resolve those problems. And then we've got to figure out what our vision is for the future. Where do we want to be for our kids and for our grandchildren? And that's what I want to do tonight. When I'm finished, I'd love to hear not only your questions, I'd love to hear your ideas as to how we move the country forward. But let me start off by telling you what I think the great problem facing this country is. And that is that increasingly a small number of extraordinarily wealthy people control not only our economy, but the political life of this country. And these people for decades have been at war with the middle class and the working class of this country. And I should tell you that they are very, very religious people, but they have a strange religion. Their religion is greed. They want more and more and more, and they are insatiable. We all have friends or family members who have problems with alcohol, or we have friends and family members who have problems with drugs. And these guys have a problem with wealth and power. They cannot control themselves, and they are prepared to step on the lives of millions and millions of people to get what they want. And what this campaign is essentially about is to say to these people, you cannot have it all. Enough is enough. This great country and our government belong to all of us and not just to super PACs and billionaire campaign contributors. Now, the first point, I keep saying first point, I'll say that 14 times. I'm repeating myself, but one of the major points that I want to make, and I'm the only candidate for president who will tell you this simple truth, but it's a simple truth. No president, no matter how decent, hardworking, smart, honest is, no matter who that person is, that person cannot do it alone. Because the powers in Washington, D.C., the lobbyists, the corporate influence, the campaign donors are so powerful that what we need in this country to counteract that power is a mass movement of ordinary people standing together around a progressive agenda which meets the needs of working families. And that's important. The Koch brothers and their employees, like Scott Walker and those guys, want to destroy the trade union movement. And the reason is not just that employers would rather not have collective bargaining so they can pay low wages. That's obviously true. But there is another truth that is more important. That the trade union movement today is the last impediment to the big money interest controlling everything in America. Trade union movement is the one remaining force that brings millions of people together around an agenda that represents the needs of working families. That is why they want to destroy the trade union movement, and that is why we have got to fight back and grow the trade union movement. Today, we live in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. That is where we are today. This day, we are the wealthiest nation, not only on earth, but in the history of the world. And yet this morning, I was in Des Moines, and I was talking to some very nice people whose job it is at the farmer's market in Des Moines is to take the food that is not sold and make sure that it goes to emergency food shelves so that working people who are not making enough money can have enough food to eat in the wealthiest nation on earth. Earlier today, we were at a meeting, and a woman, a teacher, mentioned to me, she said, "Senator, in my school, 90% of the kids are on free or discounted lunches. In the wealthiest nation in the history of the world." So we have got to ask ourselves, what is going on in the wealthiest nation in the history of the world when so many people are struggling? When ordinary people, by the millions, are working longer hours for low wages. When 45 million people are living in poverty, many of them who are working. When 35 million Americans have no health insurance. When millions of young people are leaving school deeply in debt and others cannot afford to go to college. How is that happening in the wealthiest country in the history of the world? Now, we can understand that if we were in Haiti tonight, I mean that seriously, it is a poor country. There are poor countries all over the world who are struggling, and we have an obligation to help them. This is not a poor country. And the irony, to add insult to injury, is that virtually every worker in this country is now producing more, has higher levels of productivity because of an explosion in technology. So the simple question is, if I give you a tool that makes you more productive, why is it that you're working longer hours for low wages? And the answer is that there is a war that has been going on for decades by the big money interest in this country against the working families. There is class warfare going on, and sadly and tragically, the wrong class is winning, and we have got to reverse that. I listen to a lot of speeches. Needless to say, when you're in a senator, you listen to a lot of speeches. And what a lot of my Republican colleagues talk about is their great fear about wealth redistribution. Oh my goodness. So let me tell you a little secret. In the last 30 years, there has been a massive redistribution of wealth in America. I want everybody to know that. The sad reality is that redistribution has been from the middle class and working families to the top 1/10 of 1%. I am talking about many trillions of dollars. So if you had a pie chart here, what you would find is the percentage of wealth owned by the middle class has shrunk. The percentage of wealth owned by the top 1/10 of 1% has gotten much larger. Today in America, we have the most unequal distribution of wealth and income of any major industrialized nation on earth, and it is worse today in America than in any time since before the Great Depression of 1929, and by the way, that is not coincidental. Today in America, and I want you to hear this, I'm going to bore you with some facts, but this is important stuff, so you'll indulge me for a moment. Don't fall asleep quite yet. It gets better later on. Today, the top 1/10 of 1% owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. Today in America, 99% of all new income, 99% is going to the top 1%. Today in America, one family, the Walton family who owns Walmart's, that family owns more wealth itself than the bottom 130 million Americans, one family. In the last 2 years, according to Forbes magazine, this is really quite extraordinary, the 14 wealthiest people in this country, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Koch brothers, those guys, 14 people saw an increase in their wealth by $157 billion. That is more wealth increase in 2 years by 14 people than is owned by the bottom 40% of the American people. Now, brothers and sisters, that is a reality that we have got to deal with. The issue of income and wealth inequality is the great moral issue of our time. It is the great economic issue of our time. And it is the great political issue of our time. This type of inequality is bad economics, it is bad politics, it is unsustainable, and it is not what America is supposed to be about, and we together are going to change that. So it is fine for candidates to talk about all the nice things they want to do, and that's great. But at the end of the day, we will not make progress unless we look the billionaire class in the eye and we say to them loudly and clearly, this country belongs to all of us and not just you. This small number of people with their incredible wealth, with their incredible power, we have got to say to them that they cannot get huge tax breaks when children in this country go hungry. They cannot continue to send our jobs to China when millions of people are looking for work. They cannot continue to hide their billions of dollars in profit in the Cayman Islands and in other tax havens when there are so many unmet needs in this country. And the message to them is clear. Their greed has got to end. They cannot take advantage of the benefits of America if they refuse to accept their responsibilities as Americans. Yeah. I don't have to explain to anybody in this room who's involved in the trade union movement that what you understand is when people stand together, they win. When people are divided, we lose. Now, these guys have unbelievable amounts of money. They control the economy. They have very heavy, they own the Republican Party. They have too much influence over the Democratic Party. They control the media. That's the reality. I would not lie to you. That is the simple reality. And in fact, there are people smarter than me, and I say this to you unhappily, who think, in fact, they can't be beat. They're just too powerful, and that's where we are right now. But I am the father of 4 beautiful kids and the grandfather of 7 beautiful grandchildren. I'm really blessed with my family. And I will be damned if I'm going to surrender this country to that handful of people. I'm going to fight as hard as I hope you will. And when people tell you, I'm sure you have co-workers. You're out here tonight, and I'm sure you have co-workers who are saying, hey, why did you go to a dinner tonight? Why are you hearing some guy from a state that no one ever heard of? When you could be home watching a ball game or doing something. Why are you so dumb to believe that politics and government are important? And when your co-workers tell you that, or your brothers and your sisters tell you that, you tell them that if politics is so irrelevant, why are the Koch brothers going to spend $900 million on this election to elect their candidates to make the rich richer and everybody else poorer? If politics is so irrelevant, I want to know why they're spending that much money. And if they're spending that much money, we damn well better pay attention to what's going on in this country. Let me tell you another reality, because it's not just the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality. It is the tragic reality that for the last 40 years, now we are better off today than we were when Bush left office. No debate about that. But you know, I think Democrats make a mistake by saying, well, we're better off than we were, 6, 7 years ago. That's true. But the truth of the matter, the deeper truth of the matter, is that for the last 40 years, 40 years, the middle class of this country has been disappearing. Throughout my state of Vermont, and I'm sure it's true here in Iowa, it is not unusual to speak to people who are not working 1 job, they're working 2 jobs, they are working 3 jobs to cobble together some income and some health care. I will never forget, sometimes you have meetings or things happen to you that you never forget. I was outside of a grocery store, Burlington, Vermont. This woman comes up to me and she says, we have 1 kid, and my husband and I would like to have more kids. But I'm working 3 jobs, he's working 3 jobs, and we don't think that we can be the parents that we should be. So we're not having any more kids like that. And that's a story being told all over this country. And the question that we have got to ask ourselves is why? Why does it happen that median family income has gone down by almost $5,000 since 1999? Why is it happening that people throughout our country are struggling so hard to take care of basic economic needs? Now, let me tell you something about unemployment. When you read the papers say that unemployment in America is 5.4%. That is one way that the government defines unemployment. The other way, which includes those people who have given up looking for work in high unemployment areas, and those many, many people who are working part-time, but they want to work full-time, you add all of that together, you know what real unemployment is in this country? It is close to 11%. That's the reality. And the other issue that we do not talk about at all, which is beyond belief, is youth unemployment. Today, according to the Economic Policy Institute, which is an important think tank in Washington, they do a great job, what they recently published is this fact. If you include young people between 17 and 20 who are high school graduates, these are the real unemployment rates for those young people. For white young people, 33%. For Hispanics, 36%. For African American youth, 51%. What are we saying to our kids? These young people graduate high school, they want to get a job, they want to make a living, they want to be independent, they want to move out of their parents' homes. We have 5.5 million young people today who have either graduated high school or dropped out of high school. And do you know what they are doing? They're doing nothing. They're hanging out on street corners and sometimes getting into trouble. So it seems to me to make a lot more sense to invest in education and invest in jobs rather than investing in jails, because we're not taking care of these kids. And it's not just income and wealth inequality, and it's not just unemployment. It is a question of wages and benefits. Let us be honest and acknowledge that the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour is a starvation wage. In my view, the minimum wage must become a living wage. That last month in Los Angeles, the city council there raised the minimum wage over a period of a few years to $15 an hour, and that's what we should be doing nationally. And a living wage should not only be fair, it should be equitable. It is indefensible that today women are making 78 cents on the dollar compared to men. We need pay equity for women workers. Some of you may also know, it doesn't get a lot of attention, and I think the president is going to move on this, we've been pushing him hard, that we have now a completely outdated Fair Labor Standards Act. What that means, when we were growing up, if you work more than 40 hours a week, you're expected to get time and a half. Most people who work more than 40 hours a week today do not get time and a half. Because you could be a quote-unquote manager in McDonald's making $30,000 a year, you're not going to get time and a half. What the president, I hope, will do was to raise that threshold up to $55,000, which will mean that millions of workers will start getting the time and a half that they deserve. I mean, many of us have heard over the years people in the Republican Party talking about family values. Family values. And generally what that means is they're against a woman's right to choose, they're against gay rights and so forth. But I want to talk to you about real family values today. And I want to ask you why it is that the United States of America is the only major industrialized country on earth that does not guarantee workers paid medical and family leave, that does not guarantee paid sick time or provide paid vacation time. What kind of family values is it when a woman gives birth to a baby and is forced to go back to work a week later because she doesn't have the income to stay home with her baby? That is not a family value. That is an attack on everything that a family is supposed to stand for, and that has got to end. Let me tell you something else that does not get a lot of attention. One of the things I love doing when I run for office is to talk about things that other people don't talk about. It's a lot of fun to do that. So here's something that many people don't know. Question: which major country on earth has workers who work the longest hours in the world?
United States of America.
Congratulations! It's you and me. We are working the longest hours of any major country on earth. The Japanese are very hardworking people. We work 137 hours a year more than they do. We work 260 more hours per year than the British do. And God bless the French, we work almost 500 hours a year more than the French. Now listen to this. This is, and all of you who know labor history, as I'm sure many of you do. Do you remember looking through books and reading and seeing pictures in the early 1900s of thousands of workers demonstrating down main streets all over America, holding up large placards which says, "We want a 40-hour work week"? You remember seeing those pictures?
Yep.
That was 100 years ago. We still don't have a 40-hour work week. And this is really pretty amazing. Today, some 85% of working men and 66% of working women work more than 40 hours a week. And also, what we should know is that millions of workers in this country, especially lower wage workers, get no paid vacation time at all. So you stop and you think, here are people working incredibly long hours, they're stressed out, they maybe would like to spend a couple of weeks with their kids in a relaxed environment. They don't have it. Every other country on earth guarantees vacation time to its workers. Many countries have 30 days paid vacation time. But at the very least, we should guarantee every worker in this country that you're going to get 10 days off with pay. I don't think that's asking too much. Now, if we are going to be successful in rallying the American people, getting people to stand up and fight for their rights, we need a progressive agenda, simple, straightforward agenda that speaks to the needs of the American worker. And let me just tick off some of the items that I believe should be in that agenda. For a start, with every poll, when the pollsters go out and they say to the people, what is the issue uppermost on your mind? What do you really care about? It's always a four-letter word called jobs. That is always the issue that comes out on top. Now here's the simple reality. We got millions of people who are unemployed and underemployed. We have an infrastructure today of roads, bridges, rail, levees, dams, water systems, wastewater plants that are disintegrating before our eyes. We can create millions of jobs rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, and I, as president, intend to do just that. Legislation for $1 trillion over a 5-year period to rebuild our infrastructure. It creates and maintains 13 million decent-paying jobs. Now, there's another issue out there that also does not get the kind of discussion outside of the trade union movement. Media basically ignores it. And this is a non-sexy but very, very important issue, and that is trade. Now, you're looking at a United States Senator who voted against NAFTA, voted against CAFTA, voted against permanent normal trade relations with China, and is going to do everything that I can to make sure this TPP is buried once and for all. We don't know the final results. Our friends on Wall Street and corporate America never quit. But we won a great victory on Friday in the House of Representatives. But I know that these guys will be back. That is not debatable. We've got to make sure that we hold the fort on that. Look, it is not, you don't need a PhD in economics to understand what our trade policies have been about and why virtually every corporation in America loves unfettered free trade, why Wall Street loves it, drug companies love it, and by the way, And I want to congratulate the trade union movement, because on this instance, every union in the country, and many environmental groups, and many religious groups stood up and said, we are going to defeat this TPP, and congratulations to everybody who made that happen on Friday. What trade agreements have been about is not complicated to understand. What corporate America did not want to do is pay American workers 15, 20, 25 bucks an hour, provide benefits, obey environmental laws. So they came up with this unfettered free trade business, NAFTA, CAFTA, China, which enables them to shut down in America, move to low-wage countries, hire people for 50 cents, a buck an hour, bring their products back in America. It's not complicated. That's what it was about. I knew that from the beginning, and you all knew that from the beginning. The results of these trade agreements is that since 2001 in America, we have lost almost 60,000 factories in Vermont, in Iowa, all over this country. Almost 60,000 factories. Not all of that is attributable to trade, but in my view, a lot of it is. Virtually every major multinational corporation has outsourced jobs to low-wage countries abroad. That is what these trade agreements are about. What TPP is about, among many other things, is that the workers in Vietnam have a minimum wage of 56 cents an hour. In my view, American workers should not have to compete against people who make 56 cents an hour. When you go home tonight and you turn on the tube, there will be every multinational corporation would tell you, buy this, buy that, and buy that. So I have a simple message for the multinationals. If they want us to buy their products, how about manufacturing those products in Iowa, in Vermont, and in Vermont? Rebuild our manufacturing base, we can create millions of decent paying jobs. You know, there are a lot of young people in this country who, when they go shopping, they don't know that there was once a time in America where you could walk into a department store and buy a product made in the United States of America. And I want those days to come back again. Now, when we talk about what's going on in this country politically, here's the reality. Millions of people, including people you work with, people in your family, every day are giving up on the political process. They're working incredibly hard hours, tough jobs, financial insecurity, and they look at what goes on in Washington and they say, hey, nobody there is talking about my needs, is paying attention to me. And then what they see are billionaires spending huge amounts of money trying to buy elections. So let me be as blunt as I can and tell you what I think most of you already know. As a result of this disastrous Supreme Court decision in the Citizens United case, the American political system has become totally corrupted, and the foundations of American democracy are being undermined. That is the simple truth. I wish I could quote it over with some syrupy language, but I can't. When you have one family, the second wealthiest family in this country, the Koch brothers, who, by the way, want to end Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, virtually all labor law, every piece of legislation passed since FDR that protects working families, they want to get rid of it. They are going to spend more money in this election cycle, close to $1 billion. That's more money than either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party will spend. So when one family, as a result of this terrible Supreme Court decision, has that much power over our politics, that is not democracy. That is called oligarchy. And we have got to end this terrible Citizens United decision. Now, I come from a state where every March we have town meetings. And people sit down and they argue about how much they want to spend on education and the roads and all these other things. And people get up and everyone talks and people get one vote. One person, one vote. That to me is what democracy is about, not billionaires buying elections and candidates. Now, let me touch on another issue, which I am hearing more and more about here in Iowa, certainly in my own state and around this country. All of you know that we live in a very competitive global economy. And if our economy is going to succeed, especially as we become more technological, we need the best educated workforce in the world. To my mind, it is nothing less than insane, and I use that word advisedly, that hundreds of thousands of bright, qualified young people today cannot get a college education simply because their family does not have the financial resources. That is not only grossly unfair to those young people and their families, denying them the opportunity to make it to the middle class, it is absolutely destructive to our economic well-being as a nation and to our future. Furthermore, we have a situation where millions of young people and middle-aged people are struggling with huge financial debt, student debt, that they incurred by going to school. Last year, I met a young woman in Burlington, Vermont, whose dream was to go to medical school to practice primary health care for low-income people, which is exactly what she is doing today. She came out of medical school $300,000 in debt. A month or so ago, I was in Davenport speaking to a large group of people, and I mentioned that, and afterwards a young lady came up to me and she said, $300,000 in debt? I just graduated dental school, $400,000 in debt. And every day, I bump into young people, $50,000 in debt, $100,000 in debt. What kind of insanity is it that at a time when we need the best educated workforce in the world, we are making it harder and harder for people to get the education that they need? That is pretty crazy stuff. I have recently introduced, and will fight for as president, legislation that would make every public college and public university in this country tuition free. That legislation would also substantially lower interest rates on student debt. And think of what that will mean to America. That working class kids who are in the 6th grade or the 10th grade to know that they should do their homework, that they should do well in school, because if they do, they will be able to go to college. Think what a transformation that will mean for America. Now, some people say it's a very radical idea. By the way, it's an expensive proposition. To do that would cost about $70 billion a year. And you know how we're going to fund this? We're putting a tax on Wall Street speculation. Seems to me if the taxpayers of this country can bail out Wall Street, then now maybe Wall Street can help the working families of this country. There is another, there are so many deep issues and important issues, we can go on for hours discussing them, but there's another issue that just cannot be swept under the rug. When we talk about our responsibilities as human beings, as parents, it goes without saying that we have a moral responsibility to leave this planet in a way that is habitable for our kids and our grandchildren. That is just a moral responsibility. The debate is over. Climate change, according to the vast majority of scientists, is real, It is caused by human activity. It is already causing devastating problems all over our country and the world. And if we do not act boldly to cut carbon, that situation will only get worse in years to come. In my view, the United States should lead the world in transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. And by the way, congratulations to Iowa for your leadership in wind. But when we, thank you right here, IBEW, for the solar panels out there. And when we do that, when we manufacture the wind turbines and the solar panels here in the United States, and when we install them in millions of homes, we create a significant number of jobs and lead the world in accepting our moral responsibility to leave this planet in a decent shape for our kids and our grandchildren. There is one country in the industrialized world, one major wealthy country, just one, that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right. Any guesses as to which country that is? All right, you guessed it. Today in America, we have 35 million people who have no health insurance. And even worse, we have more people than that who have inadequate health insurance, high deductibles, and high premiums, and I expect more than a few of them are sitting in this room right now. And the result of that is that every single year, and I talk to doctors about this, we lose many thousands of people who delay going to the doctor when they are sick. And by the time they walk into the doctor's office, their situation may be terminal, or they end up going to the hospital in great pain and great expense. In my strong view, the United States of America must join the rest of the industrialized world and say that healthcare is a right of all of our people. The best way to do it is through a Medicare for all, single-payer program. Now, I am the ranking member, which means the leader of the opposition representing Democrats on the Budget Committee. And we just went through a multi-month long period debating the budget. And of course, the Republicans who now control the Senate and the House were able to get the budget that they wanted through. And here is their budget. This is their priorities. And sadly, I think most Americans, including many Republicans, working people here in Iowa who vote Republican, don't know this. So let them know this. Do me a favor, tell them. And here's what the budget was about. We got 35 million Americans without any health insurance. Most of us would like to see all Americans with health insurance. What the Republicans did is ended the Affordable Care Act, cut Medicaid, resulting in 27 million more Americans losing health insurance. Simply. 27 million people who have health insurance today won't have it. And you ask them, and I do, what happens to those people? How many of them will die? How many of them will suffer, become much sicker than they have to? They have no response. They don't care, not their issue. Then on top of that, at a time when so many working class families are struggling, trying to send their kids to college, the Republican budget cuts Pell Grants by $90 billion over a 10-year period. And then, when so many families in this country are trying hard to put food on the table, Republican budget makes devastating cuts to nutrition programs, including programs for low-income pregnant women and low-income babies. And then, to add insult to injury, their budget provides hundreds of billions of dollars in tax break over a 10-year period to the top 0.2%. So massive cutbacks on the needs of working families, huge tax breaks for the wealthiest people in this country. So I've got a message for my Republican colleagues. Not only are we going to defeat those proposals, we are going to take those issues in a very different direction. Republican candidate for president, whether it's Bush, Chris Christie, Rick Perry, whatever, their view of the future is to cut Social Security. My view of the future is to expand Social Security benefits. And the way we do that is by lifting the cap. Right now, somebody makes $1 million a year or $10 million a year, they contribute the same amount into the Social Security Trust Fund as somebody makes $118,000. If we start at $250,000, lift the cap at that number, we can extend Social Security for decades, and we can expand benefits for disabled vets and for older people in this country, and that is exactly what we should be doing. The struggle for equality continues today in America. Now, we have made, and we should be proud, and Iowa should be proud, its leadership role in the struggle for equality. I would hope that all of us believe that we judge people, we look at people, based on who they are as human beings, their character, their ideas, and not on the color of their skin or their sexual orientation. If we were sitting in this room 40 years ago, and people said, you know, I think in maybe 2008, the United States of America is going to overcome its racist past and would elect an African American to be president. 40 years ago, people in this room would have said, you're nuts. That will never happen. And yet, led by the almost all-white state of Iowa, you did that. And that's a pretty good thing. You could dislike Barack Obama, or you could agree with him or disagree with him. But it is a major step forward in this country that we are beginning to look at people based on their ideas and not the color of their skin. We have made progress on women's rights. We still have a long way to go. I can remember like it was yesterday in the 1980s, when I was mayor of Burlington, Vermont, we appointed the first woman to be a police officer. What a big deal that was. Today, as the former chairman of the Veterans Committee, we deal every day with women who are generals, women who are in combat. You know, in medical schools today, I think there are more women than men, more women than laws. The world has radically changed. I was outside of Marshalltown earlier today, and I was just thinking about this. We were just resting a bit in a park, and we see all these girls playing softball. And in Burlington, Vermont, half the women in the city are running marathons, you know. The world has changed, and that is a good thing, because we want equal opportunity for our kids, whether they're girls or they're boys, and we've got to break down all of those barriers, and we should be proud of the progress we are making, and we've got more to do. We should be proud of the fact that 20 or 30 years ago, if we sat in this room, and somebody said, you know, I think there are going to be conservative states in this country that will vote for gay marriage. People in this room would have said, you're crazy. But the country has changed. And people now understand that people have a right to live their lives regardless of their sexual orientation. That is a good thing. We have made good progress. But clearly we still have a long, long way to go. And a lot of that struggle is taking place in inner cities throughout our nation. From Ferguson to Baltimore and across the nation. Too many African Americans and other minorities find themselves subjected to a system that treats citizens who have not committed any crime as criminals. If current trends continue, and listen to this, because this is a real American tragedy. 1 in 3 black males born today can expect to spend time in prison during their lifetime. This is an unspeakable tragedy, but this crisis of over-incarceration is not just a destruction of human life, it is also costly to the taxpayers who spend almost $70 billion a year on prisons. To me, it makes a lot more sense to make sure that our kids get the education that they need, that our kids get the jobs that they need, than filling up our prisons with people who have not committed violent crimes. In 2008, I was invited to go to a town. I don't know if anyone has heard of this town. It's called Immokalee, Florida. That ring a bell to anybody? It's near Naples, Florida. It's a small town. And the reason I went down there is it turns out that that town produces most of the tomatoes that fast food places like McDonald's and Burger King use, a low-grade tomato. And virtually all of those tomatoes are produced by undocumented workers. And everybody knows it. Okay? And I went down there, and it turns out, coincidentally, that the day I went down there, the front page of the newspaper, the local newspaper, had a story that the U.S. attorney, I think it was the U.S. attorney, was prosecuting a contractor for violation of anti-slavery law. That a worker was literally held in physical captivity and forced to work. People there were living, and I saw this with my own eyes, in horrendous housing, working longer hours for lower wages. We have got to get a handle on this immigration issue. In my view, we need a path towards citizenship for undocumented workers. Is that when those workers are exploited and they have no rights, it impacts not just them, but every worker in America. That is part of the race to the bottom that we have got to fight. All right, let me conclude, and I want to hear your ideas. Let me conclude by saying this. All of us are aware that we face enormous problems in this country today. And I've ticked off some of them, and there are others I didn't even get into. And we also are aware that so many of our people are demoralized, are giving up on our democracy that people fought and died to defend. But I believe, from the bottom of my heart, that if we all stand together, as the trade union movement has done for decade after decade after decade, if we reach out to people who year after year vote against their own best interests. If we bring people together and say, okay, we can disagree on gay marriage, fine. We can disagree on abortion, fine. We can disagree on guns, fine. But don't vote for people who are sending your jobs to China. Don't vote for people who don't want to raise the minimum wage. Don't vote for people who are preventing your kids from going to college or letting your little kids have decent child care. So what we have got to do is to create a movement around basic economic rights, stand together, and take on the big money interests who have so much power today. And when we do that, in this great country, the wealthiest in the world, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. I do not want you to think small. The debate should not be whether we cut education by 2% or 4%. The debate should be that every kid in this country gets a quality education from child care to graduate school. The debate should not be about whether we have 30 million people without health insurance or 50 million people without health insurance. The debate should be about making sure that all of our people, as a right, have health care. So what this campaign is about is thinking big. We can do it. I remember A couple of years ago, I was up in northern Vermont, right near the Canadian border. It's a town called Derby, that's where Phil grew up. And we were there, and it was an event to honor men and women who had fought in World War II. And thank God there were a whole lot of them there. And it was lovely to see them. And before the program got underway, a young lady put together a video, and it stayed in my mind. The video was of Franklin Delano Roosevelt on December 8th, 1941, speaking to Congress. You all remember that? You read that? Yes. And that was the day after Pearl Harbor, and it was the day that he declared war against Japan. And at that moment, Hitler was running wild all over Europe, and Japanese imperialism was moving very aggressively, and they just bombed Pearl Harbor. At that particular day, December 8th, 1941, the United States was in fact totally unprepared to fight a war in Europe and a war in Asia. Our military strength was minimal, and from an armament point of view, we did not have the tanks, the planes, the guns to fight that war. And you know what happened? In 2.5, 3 years, the war ended in 45, but essentially the war was won 2.5, 3 years later. The American people came together. We built the aircraft carriers we needed. My father was working in the Brooklyn Navy Yard doing some of that. We built the tanks and the guns, and we trained our soldiers. And in 2.5 years, we defeated essentially Hitler and the Japanese. If we could do that as a nation in 2.5 years, what can't we do when we put our minds to it? Don't tell me we can't provide health care to all people. Don't tell me our kids can't get the best education in the world. Don't tell me we can't lead the world in transforming our energy system and combating climate change. Yes, we can. We can do all of that. But we can't do it, as trade unionists well know, if we're not standing together. Brothers and sisters, they have the money, they have the power, we have the people. And if we stand together, we're going to win this thing. Thank you very much. What I'd like to do is I'm happy to take any questions that people may have, but I'll tell you what I'd also like to do. We're among friends here. There's only a few TV cameras in the back there, but they won't tell us. I'd like to have a discussion as well. People disagree with me, I'd like to hear it. I'd like to hear your ideas in terms of addressing some of the issues that I face. I'm delighted to take any questions, but I'd also love to hear some comments and your thoughts. And what I'd like you to think about, and maybe help me answer this one. How does it happen that so many working people are voting against their own best interests? Help me on that one. Okay? Okay, let's get going. Phil, do we have a mic? Who's doing the microphone? All right, we don't have a mic? Okay, just stand up and I'll translate you. Yeah.
I think the media in this country basically controls everything from our thought process down to what we digest every day. Who gets the most amount of money on any political campaign? And that's the media in this country.
Right.
And so they need to be exposed for what they are.
Well, the John, if everybody heard. What's your name, sir?
Bob.
What Bob was talking about is the power of the media influencing every aspect of our life, and I think he makes a very good point. Let me give you that from a personal perspective of being a candidate for president. I have never run a negative television ad in my life. I've been in a lot of campaigns. Now, my understanding is that here in Iowa you have seen 1 or 2 negative ads. Is that true? Just 1 or 2. I was told a few months ago that people stopped answering their phones. Is that true? Yes. Make so many robocalls. All right. What I am not going to do in this campaign is attack people personally. Not going to get involved in. You cannot believe When I walk down the corridors in the nation's capital, how many reporters come up to me wanting me to attack? They get angry at me because I don't attack Hillary Clinton. We're not going to do that. What we are going to do is talk about the issues facing the American people. Well, I talked about some of them, there's some I haven't talked about. What the media does to a lot, not all of them, and there's some great writers out there who do some really good things, good stuff on TV. But by and large, to be honest with you, media thinks you're kind of dumb. And that you really can't deal with the difficult issues of trade and economics and minimum wage. That's just too hard. And what you really want to hear about is the gossip in the campaign. Who, did you know that George Bush, that Jeb Bush got a new campaign manager? All of you staying up nights worried about that? Or you're worried about some dumb thing that some kid on the campaign said in a Facebook thing? Or you're worried about how much money somebody is raising? You're not worried about that stuff. You're worried about what's happening in your lives and your kids' lives. That's the kind of discussion we must demand that the media allows us to have. Because people, we live in a democracy. People have different points of view. I don't criticize somebody because they have a different point of view. But let's get it out there. Let's have that argument. Middle class is disappearing. How do we rebuild the middle class? What does Jeb Bush have to say? He thinks cutting Social Security and giving tax breaks to billionaires is a good idea. Fine. Let him tell the American people with that idea. I disagree. Let's have that debate. But let's not look at politics as some kind of game. It ain't a game. It impacts the lives of hundreds of millions of people, and unfortunately, media treats it as a game and a soap opera. Yes, sir.
Yes, I think one of the biggest issues...
All right, it looks like a mic is on your way.
Okay, sorry. Yes, I think one of the biggest issues is also has to do with apathy in this country. The fact that people do not get out and vote. And I mean, that I think is of a grave concern to me, because these people, by not getting out and voting, are basically deciding their futures, what's going to happen in their country, that type of thing.
All right, let me throw it back to people. I wouldn't use the word apathy. I would use the word alienated, discouraged, disgusted. All right, what's your name, by the way?
My name is Adam.
Adam? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Adam asked the question, why aren't people voting in large numbers? In the last election, 63% of the American people did not vote in November, 80% of young people. Why aren't they voting? Who has thoughts on that? Yeah, young person right there.
Is this on?
Yeah.
Okay, what occurs to me of why the youth is not voting, there's two things. What I think is that the people in Washington don't think about us as a merging majority who, I'm 17 and I'm about to be ready to vote. So I'm trying to figure out how, who should I vote for, who's going to support me. But right now, some of my fellow classmates do not know who's going to support them and their needs.
I think that's exactly right. I think essentially what millions of people are saying by not voting, they're saying, I don't want to participate in this charade. I don't want to be voting for people when they are ignoring my needs. Why should I give credibility to a system that isn't working for me? That's kind of what I think. Okay, other questions, comments? Don't be shy. Yeah.
Mr. Sanders, you asked the question, why do people vote against their best interest?
Yes.
The answer for I have, everyone should read a book called Dog Whistle Politics by a gentleman by the name of Lopez. That will explain it. I don't have time to explain it here tonight. I'll take up your speech. But it explains why the white middle class votes against its own best interest. I encourage everyone to read that book, Dog Whistle Politics by Mr. Lopez.
Well, let me pick up. I didn't read the book. Let me tell you a story. And this is how politics works in America, how Republicans do it effectively. And I think it's probably what Mr. Lopez is writing about. States like Mississippi historically have been some of the poorest states in the country. And white workers, historically, way back when, made the lowest wages of any white worker in America. And you know what the leaders of that state were doing 50 years ago? What they were saying is, yeah, we're not paying you any money, but at least you could drink at that water fountain and that black guy can't. And that was how they kept people impoverished, playing off one group against the other. And to a significant degree, that type of wedge politics, playing whites off against blacks, men off against women, straights off against gays, native-born against immigrants, that is still what goes on in this country. And that's how they win elections. And our job is to do exactly the opposite. They want to slice us and dice us. Our job is to bring people together. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to know how you're going to prevent them doing to you what they did to the president. Because we all came together when we elected Mr. Obama, and we were all so excited and crying and happy and thought we had gotten to the promised land, and they have shackled him. And how can we be, I mean, I'm with you, but how do we stop that from happening?
Well, let me go back to the very first point that I made 8 hours ago. You forgot, so I'll repeat it. Let me tell you a word about Barack Obama. He's a friend of mine, and I like him. And history will judge him a lot better than his contemporaries will. And I have strongly disagreed with him on a number of issues, including this TPP, beyond my comprehension why he's doing what he's doing. I disagreed with him when he extended Bush's tax breaks for the wealthy, and I was on the floor of the Senate for 8.5 hours to express my opposition. But here's the mistake I believe that the president made, and I had the privilege of telling him this story. He didn't agree, but nonetheless. He ran in 2008 one of the great campaigns in American history. We saw it here in Iowa. It was a brilliant campaign. And what he did all over America, in Iowa and elsewhere, is he brought divergent groups together. The mistake that he made is that, in a sense, the day after he won, he said, thank you all, millions of people, for electing me president. I'll take it from here. I'm on my own. I'm going to sit down with John Boehner. We're going to negotiate. That was a tragic mistake which took him 5 years to learn. He doesn't do that anymore. He now writes executive orders, which is a step forward. But to answer your question, it gets back to what I said in the beginning of my remarks. So let me be very clear. I want your support. I want your help in the campaign. I'd like your votes. But if anybody in this room thinks that I am telling you that you send me to the White House and you don't have any problems, I'm going to take it from there, you are crazy. I am not telling you that. Here's the bad news. I need your help to get me elected, and the day after the election, I'm going to need your active help to implement the policies that make sense to working families. That's what President Obama did not. All right, now, give you some examples. You are seeing around this country, in cities and states, the minimum wage going up, right? Yes. Do you think that that took place because some smart governors or mayors thought, I think I'm going to raise the minimum wage? That's not how it happened. It happened because people, and I've been with those people on demonstrations, low-income workers took to the streets and they said, we can't make it on $7.50 or $8 an hour. And they rallied. And you know what happened? All over this country, the minimum wage is going up. I say to the young people, if you want free tuition in public colleges and universities, if you want to lower interest rates on student debt, we can do it. Bring 1 million of your friends to Washington, D.C. Give the Republicans give the Republicans an option that just cannot refuse. See, and that takes place all over this place. There was a poll done a year and a half ago, 2 polls. Over 60% of the American people did not even know which political party controlled the U.S. House or the U.S. Senate. Now, how the heck do you have a serious discussion? You could be a Republican, you could be a Democrat, whatever. But how do you have a serious discussion and make intelligent critique if you don't even know which party controls the House and the Senate? So when I talk about the need for a political revolution, that's what I'm talking about. It's to change consciousness in this country. And when people understand what's going on and are involved in the political process, I'm not asking for much. I'm only asking for people to maybe pay 50% as much attention to politics as to football. I'm being conservative. 50% is all I need. And if people do that, and start asking about our trade policy, well, why the rich get richer and everybody else gets poor, we turn this country around. All right, maybe one more question or comment. Yes, microphone. There's a woman right there in the orange. All right, that's fine. That's fine.
You asked why we vote against our own best interests, and I think because so many of us were raised not to be greedy. As an educator, I've been told over and over again, those greedy teachers. Us greedy teachers are trying to work for our students, not necessarily for ourselves, but we also have children of our own at home that we have to work for. So it comes down to when we're told over and over that it's our greed, whether we're a steel worker who wants to raise a family or construct the best bridge, building, whatever, it's not our personal greed that we need to be worried about. We need to get over that and stand up for ourselves and for each other and say, I'm greedy in that I have a right to a living wage, I have a right to health care, I have a right to education for myself and my family. And until we do that, that's why we're going to continue to vote against ourselves.
Thank you. You said it better than I did. All right, let me just conclude. Great. Thank you very much for the dinner. It was really good. And thank you all very much for coming out. These are serious times. These are troubling times for our country. But as I said earlier, I have every belief from the bottom of my heart that if we stand together, there is no limit to what we can do. I look forward to working with you in the months and years ahead. Thanks very much again.
Folks, we have a raffle back there and some t-shirts. The bar will be open until 9 o'clock. So make yourselves at home. Thank you.